So in this video, we're going to talk about couples.
Yeah, men and women who have felt and experienced betrayal, whether it's the man who betrayed the woman or the woman who betrayed the man. But typically our experience is mostly in our practice, men that have betrayed women, but it cuts both ways. But that's the topic we want to talk about today and how we go about that.
Yeah. So this is my friend and colleague, Mark Bell, licensed marriage family therapist.
Marriage and family therapist, you got it.
And also men's wellness expert, men's sexuality expert.
Expert, no less. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to call you expert.
Thank you. I'll take that. This is my good friend Jenny, who likes to compliment me, and I appreciate that.
He's passionate about what he does,
I
match that passion. I think we're both excited about the work we do.
I agree. This is clearly my friend and colleague Jeni Steele. She is a licensed professional counselor and a fierce advocate for women. Women's health, women's recovery, women's healing, but women's appreciation of what's it within them to become who they're capable of being. And instead of looking outside, they get to look inside. And we live in a culture that doesn't often encourage that. And I think you do a fantastic job of that. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks, man.
I think it's really important to let the folks that want to come here know a little more about us. But I want to lead off and just kind of share a little about you, Jenny. One of the things that people need to know about you is that you are a fierce advocate for women. And not just girl power fierce, but rather self-empowerment. What I've really learned about women in therapy from you has exponentially expanded my capacity to work with the men that I deal with. Obviously, I work mostly with men that have betrayed their wives, hurt their families, injured their relationships tremendously. And the training I've gained from you about understanding the betrayed partner's experience has been exceptional, especially since it's very non-traditional from what I see in many ways outside in the therapy community right now. I find you very much about leading women towards gaining their own strength rather than looking to their betraying partner as the source of their strength and their health and their security. And so it's one of my personal and professional privileges to get to work with you and to collaborate, because obviously we don't always agree on everything, and that's the beauty of our ability to synergize, right? We come together, we have a lot of really interesting conversations, and I'll pound the pavement for my guys and you'll pound them for your girls, and then we come to a place where like, oh, okay, I'm seeing some of my blind spots here and you're helping me see that, and I hope that I can offer that to you. But that's been a tremendous resource for me, is to see how I can be a more effective therapist with the guys that have betrayed, seeing the lens of the women that you work with that have been betrayed by them.
No doubt. I think that we are way better together than we are on our own.
I agree 100%.
You know, we're always working through little issues that we have therapeutically, and I do love that because it is helpful. I do have blind spots. You have a few too.
I got a couple.
A few. So we're always working through that, which I really like. I think that you're absolutely right. We advocate for our clients, but we advocate for their wellness.
Yes.
And their balance.
Yeah, not their being rightness, but the health.
Right, their health, their wellness. You know, we want our people to feel good about who they are. We want them to have self-compassion for themselves and each other. We want them to work from a place of self-trust and confidence. You know, a lot of times people come into our office, they want their family.
Yes.
They don't want to throw it away.
No, it's not disposable.
Like 9 times out of 10, people want to repair.
They're just so stuck.
They don't know how.
They don't know how. She's clearly stuck in the pain that he's inflicted upon her. He's stuck in the shame that he knows that I've done this, but he's also wrestling with justifications, grievances, resentments, historical and within the context of the relationship. And I'm working really hard to help this guy sort through what's what, you know, because your wife didn't cause this. She didn't create this, right? Now, the relationship probably had its own challenges before.
Of course.
But that's a secondary conversation, right?
That's
the first wave is there's a betrayal here and we have to address this, and I need to help my guys understand that there's an empathy component that they have not been operating from. It's hard for them to have empathy for their spouses. They feel really guilty and bad about what they've done and the effect it's having on them, but they perceive that as, I care for her. That's why I don't tell her these things. The reality is if you're caring for her, you're being honest with her. You're communicating transparently, but the fear, the insecurity, the uncertainty that drives it is they're still struggling with compassion for themselves. So how can they actually have empathy for what she's going through when they still demonize and shame themselves for what they're going through? And there's all kinds of messages, you know, that are going on in their heads. And when they get stuck in that cycle of self-rationalization, isolation, and looking for any any justification to go that route. And they sincerely believe it. That's the thing. They're not thinking, oh, I'm pulling a fast one on her. I want to really put screws to her. No, they really buy into the chaos and the distorted thinking that's going on in their lives because they're hurting and suffering. The problem is, as we know, hurting people tend to hurt other people, right?
Yeah.
And so goes the same when these betrayed women, these poor women are hurting tremendously. They have been put through the ringer, and yet we see that hurt comes out of them. And these guys, my job is to help them figure out how to endure the waves of that, because it's not going to go away immediately, right?
Yeah.
They have to be able to endure with compassion and patience. Otherwise, she doesn't have a venting space for it.
That right there is brutal.
Yeah.
And I know that is generally, like you say, you work with generally the men, that is generally where they have to find their anchor.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It's harsh.
I thank you men for doing that.
Yeah, well, I tell them, I say, you've got at least 6 months where you're really not going to be able to push back on anything she's saying because she's in trauma. She's in overwhelm.
She is gutted.
Yeah, you've got to build some stamina and some internal integrity, and that's why I work really hard to get them immediately into a men's group, because you can't be looking for your wife that you betrayed to be the source of strength and support and reassurance to you, because it ain't her role at this point.
Yeah, the attachment has been
Destroyed.
Right. Which is, I think, really interesting in betrayal, right? It's one of the experiences where you actually lose your attachment. And, we understand in science, in this kind of science, that attachment is the foundation of kind of
safety, security,
wellness, health. We usually get that from our growing up years,
Correct.
right? And then we get into the secondary attachment as an adult.
Right.
And all of a sudden, with betrayal, you lose your person. You love your person.
Yeah.
You're angry at your person.
But who is this person that did this to me?
But who is it? And
Because it's not the version that I married.
I don't know who to talk to now. I don't know who to trust. I don't know
Yeah.
what the world means.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. So I love the way that you do that, because my clients often need that bubble to stabilize.
Yes.
And so we go inside to stabilize. I'm not looking for your guys to stabilize, my clients.
Fantastic.
It's how do I stabilize me?
You got it.
How do I ground me?
Yeah.
How do I step into the emotion? How do I ride the ups and downs? How do I take care of myself? Honestly, sometimes I think it's really weird to say this, but this whole thing is all about self-care. Would you
really
agree?
is. It totally is.
In a weird way.
These men, most of the time, are injuring their spouse through these activities. Some of them actually have an addiction, and so that's its own brand. Not everybody that betrays their spouse is an addict, not a sex addict. What they've done is chosen a path of self-care, which didn't really take care of anything. It just distracted away from what they needed to be looking at that was inside them, and then it all just gets, who's the collateral damage? The spouse, the children, the loved ones. His work is absolutely to stay away from looking to her to make him feel better about himself. It doesn't mean we aren't looking to eventually get them, if possible, to be supports to each other, to be the connected pieces that they've always wanted to be. But I can't start from a place of I betrayed you, but now I need you to be soft on me. I need you to appreciate I'm different now. So why are you still mad?
I said I was sorry.
Yeah, I said I was sorry, and they
what
mean
else
it.
Can I do?
And they truly mean it.
But for her, it's like.
But she doesn't have the capacity in that moment.
No.
And for a long season, and his responsibility is not to seek that from her. He needs to seek that within himself and from a community of other men in recovery. And it can't just be guys, right? Because guys who haven't done some of that personal work themselves don't necessarily have what that man needs for connection. And it doesn't mean, get rid of your brother, your dad, or your uncle. Like, if you've got great relationships, great. If they can open up to you and be a part of that, that's great. But my experience has shown that if a guy has done some betraying and had some injuries in that regard and is doing his own work, he's the kind of guy the next guy in line needs to be connecting with and in a community of them, because they get it. And yes, we can have a bit of a complain and vent mode. Everybody's got to have it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, these guys say, great, you've got it out of your system. Now, what are you going to do to take care of yourself? How are you going to respond? Here's some things that have worked for me in the past. Do with them what you will. Here's some things that I wished I'd have known otherwise, because I stepped on some landmines and I set back my recovery. I set back my wife's healing tremendously. The community of men that do that, it's essential. And if a guy comes to see me, I tell him, you're not going to get as far with me by myself as you will if you get involved in my men's group or a supportive, strong men's group that really holds you accountable, but is there to care for you as well. That they can, then they're expecting a reciprocity in that, right? You're like a drunk driver that ran over your wife. You can't actually do all the traction and the healing and the recovery for her, but man, you can really make it worse. You can really get in the way of her healing and recovery. So let her do her healing, and a part of that is, yeah, she's going to be throwing some energy at you. It gets real ugly, real intense at times. But as long as I know that they're working with you and that they're not looking to him to solve it, but they've got to get it out of their system so that they can get back to taking care of themselves, then we've got an opportunity.
We call that the barfing out stage.
Yeah, okay,
we're going to barf it out.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we got to get it out, and then we stabilize, right? So I agree with you. I think that individual work is excellent. Group work is where it's at.
Amen.
Because a lot of times in betrayal, you lose trust of self, at least on the women's side of things, from what I understand. You lose trust in yourself. That's one of the injuries. And then you lose trust of others. And the beauty of being in a group is it's kind of like making you uncomfortability, and you got to maybe trust a person a little bit and try it. And it really is hard for people, but it is the actual work of change and growth.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if it's the same for the men, except on the front end. On the front end, it's really hard to convince them to come. Yeah. But once they're there, it's usually that first session. It's like this drink of water that they've been waiting for their whole life, and they're like, I didn't know this existed, because they have a preconceived notion of what's going to happen there, and it's, you know, stereotypical TV, whatever they've made up in their head or from their family of origin. But the way that we structure it here, the way that these guys get after it, and the way they connect with each other outside of the meeting, right? That is the most critical component, is how they stay connected outside, because I don't want them attached to me permanently. I don't want them staying intimately involved in me, the therapist. I want them learning how to connect with these men and then translating that into other relationships throughout the rest of their life.
Into our neighborhoods, and our families.
But I sense with the betrayed women that it continues to be a bit of a battle on the front end, or I could be wrong, but their experience with the group may take a little bit longer, because it's pretty quick for the guys right off the bat.
You know, it is sometimes harder for women. I think that
Betrayed women.
I think that betrayed women want to gather. They do. Yeah. It's kind of in our nature, you know. Cool. It's how we move through the world. Yeah. But when it comes to betrayal, there's this level of humiliation. There's this level of self-loathing. A lot of times I hear people say they don't want to come to group because they don't want to hear other people's stories, whether the story is worse or getting better, right? There's some kind of comparison and judgment. So really we're learning, how do I be with other people, and how do I have what I call, you know, internal boundaries? Yeah. Because we talk a lot about boundaries for other people, but there's so many boundaries in self. And so how do I come to group, share, but also hold a small boundary so that I'm not being flooded by other people's experiences, or I'm not comparing myself. Totally makes sense. I'm just kind of allowing myself to be, accepting myself where I am in the midst of all the things, all the people.
Knowing that that's your process, that I can continue to relay that to the men that I work with, helps them tremendously, because there's a part of them that feels like they're supposed to overdo something or pretend to something that they can't, or endure even unhealthy dynamics because I'm the bad guy, I deserve this. It's really helping them understand, no, your wife is working her own process. Give her space. Sometimes it doesn't look like it because she's in trauma and in pain, and it ain't going to be pretty,
she's blowing it up,
You're not trying to put makeup on this. It's raw. But these men can actually do really well in that connected space, knowing that there's this type of dynamic going on.
I think that's so good to hear. Thank you. Because one thing I think is really important here is that there's this, you're talking about the truth, like just telling the truth. Yeah. Right? Like, I feel this way. And often we see, you know, the opposite end, like you're saying. Men might feel that shame, like I have to perform, I have to pretend like I'm doing this, I have to have my tail between my legs and do whatever she wants, how she wants it. And that's more of the same. Correct. That's more of the pretending.
Creates the dynamic.
And the pretending is the problem. And so really we want to equalize the relationship by removing the falsities, the masks, the pretending. Can we be real and still love each other? Can we be real and still heal? Yeah. And absolutely we can. Okay. Not always.
Agreed.
But you know.
You know, one thing I want to mention before we kind of close out this video is that it happens in reverse as well. You know, there are men that have been on the receiving end of betrayal, right? It happens, and women who are the betrayers. 100%. Right? And the process is similar, but there are some nuances that are a little bit different. We work with that as well. Oh, right? And we've had some really fantastic experiences with couples like that, and we want to make sure that clients know that you're welcome here as well. regardless of what end you are. If
100%.
you're a male betrayer or betrayed, if you're a female betrayer or betrayed, don't love those terms, but
I know,
it gets
I
the
wish we
point
had
across,
better
right?
words,
We got to
man.
come up with a better term for it, but
We do.
for the mainstream folks, they get what we're talking about, right? That there's a space for them here.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot more process involved in this that we don't necessarily have time to talk about today, but I hope people get a sense of how we operate and how we spar, but in a clinically healthy way. And I think we've grown tremendously in our relationship professionally.